I'll just wander through that crowd over there and then come back. So the debate will be held at IC.
You can challenge them. You can ask them to invite them to
IC3,
the
yeah.
arena
From your
for a
privilege.
challenge. You can invite them to the arena for a challenge.
Well, that's right, but I think, you know.
You can just bring them and say, okay, could we have some representatives?
What time did you get here today?
Oh, I got here at 8:30.
8:30, that's early enough. You're an early bird. Very reliable early bird.
Yeah.
So this is the arena for discussion. And
Should we just bag this stuff? Because I'm not going to read it. This stuff now.
Yeah, this is the main part.
You've got to do what you've got to do. Whatever you feel more comfortable with.
Hey, morning. All right? Yeah, have a look. Yeah, go on, have a quick look. I'm in the car. Big photos. Yeah, there you go. There you go.
I'll send you. Remind me. She's just sent me. She's not back.
So just like a placard, and she gave me one. I've still got it, and that's from like 5 years ago. So nice. Yeah, it's really nice. So talented.
People doing what they love.
Yeah.
Where they love them.
Yeah, exactly. Or when.
hello there.
That's why I got over to one
Good. There's a few hundred here at the moment. There's more coming from different sides, so. It's a good night.
Okay.
I don't know anything more, so.
All right. Just wondering what's going on.
Okay.
Oh, there's quite a big crowd coming from the other side over there, isn't there?
No, That's a bit small, isn't it? It's a bit small, yeah.
No, there's a lot of people come from over there, though, isn't there? It's true.
Yes. It's still a bit small.
Yeah.
Maybe millions, not tens.
Is it? Why do you think it's right to protest
I'm
about
working
this
for the
issue?
BBC.
Sorry?
I'm working for the BBC.
Oh, you're with the BBC. But you're doing the job now, or you're?
Yes, working now.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah. And why do you think it's important to cover this?
That's what we need to find out.
Sorry?
We need to find out.
What do you think?
No, I don't think anything. I'm from the BBC.
That's not going to make a good clip, is it? So
No, that's why you shouldn't clip
if you're
me.
from the BBC, huh?
You shouldn't clip.
Shouldn't clip, you don't want to be filmed.
I don't mind, but I've nothing to say.
Is that really your responsibility? Is that what you think? Is that what you think the code of ethics of journalism means, that you shouldn't take a stance on something? Or
That's correct.
but what about in the Ukraine war, or on climate change, or on the pandemic? Wasn't the BBC, or isn't the BBC, a sort of mouthpiece for the official voice? Whether you agree with it or not, okay. Do you think Russia Today should be banned?
Really, you can't really put the BBC in the context of Russia Today.
No, I didn't. I'm not comparing them. I'm just saying, if you're independent, if you've got different viewpoints, you can assess something. But if it's one viewpoint, it's more difficult. So it's difficult in a war, for example, not to have the view of the other side to be able to make an evaluation. And what about in pandemic science? Wasn't it an official view being broadcast?
No.
Well, it was. Well, you might agree with it, but it was still an official view.
Are you editorialising?
Sorry?
Are you making a comment, or are you editorialising?
I'm just saying what I think, or what comes to mind. I'm not the BBC or anything like that.
No.
I just
no.
want to find out how to approximate towards the truth.
Well, if you watch the news tonight, you'll find out exactly the truth.
You think so?
Yes.
How can a segment of news be exactly the truth?
Because we'll film all of this,
Yeah.
and we'll give the context of all of this by who we speak to, and then we'll sum it all up, and that'll be
But
news.
who edits the video that goes out?
The people who film it and edit it.
And what about at the office at the news desk? Who cuts and edits that and decides what goes in?
And a very experienced, very efficient news desk producer.
And their views will have no impact on what is put in that broadcast, or what are you saying?
No one can do anything without any wider context. But the whole point of a journalist is you should always, over a period of time, balance any perspective.
So will there be a perspective put forward that contradicts the narrative of Extinction Rebellion? In other words, if someone, for example, said climate change is not caused by CO2, or such an argument, would they get an airing, or would they get no airing? Is it because the science is settled, as they say? And how do you decide that?
The science is settled.
How do you decide that?
Well, because we've covered science for 40 years.
Does that, that doesn't settle something. After all, for most of history, or most of the last 2,000 years, the Catholic Church held sway and said, this is true.
Well,
Is the BBC completely devoid of all slant, of all?
well, I suppose if someone is dead and we see someone is dead,
Yeah.
then the person is dead.
Yeah.
What's your perspective on that?
Well, for example, on the whole Russia dispute last few days,
Is it a dispute?
the dispute about the dead bodies.
Which dead
The
bodies?
dead bodies with their hands tied behind their back and shot in the head and so on.
What was the
Yeah.
dispute?
The dispute is there really concrete evidence for the BBC or another channel to say this was done by the Russians?
Well,
I know there's an audio release from Spiegel in Germany
no.
at the moment.
Have you,
But
have you covered the satellite stuff?
I've looked at some of that. Yeah.
What's your view of that?
My own view is, firstly, satellite stuff is not controlled by me, and I don't know, I don't know who produces that and how, but it seemed to me that the presentation of the argument has assumed that this is all true, that the Russians did it. I don't know if they did it, but my natural inclination is to say perhaps these were collaborators with the Russians who were being executed by layers within the Ukrainian army or in the militias or the Azov brigade or whoever, who might be trying to take retribution against those people who collaborated with the Russians.
And what makes you say that?
Just because it didn't seem any logic whatsoever to the Russians killing those people.
Well, what's the logic of bombing Krasnov station?
Well, I don't know who did that either.
Okay, so you don't believe the Russians are bombing
I
anyone?
no, I didn't say anything of the sort. I said I don't automatically assume that if a story says or implies that, for example, the Russians killed these people, and that's broadcast around the world, if it's later turns out to be wrong, the truth is running far behind. If that is the case, I don't know if maybe it's going to turn out completely true, but if it is the case that is not correct and that the Russians didn't kill those people, then that story is taken on wings all around the world and significance and importance for the dynamics of militarizing and support sending weapons.
Who do you believe killed them?
I don't know. I'm not there on the scene. I'm not a murder investigator,
Okay, so
and I don't think the BBC is either.
Okay, so who would bomb a railway station in eastern Ukraine with civilians and kill up to 100 people?
It could be the Russians, or it could be sections of the Ukrainian army, or some special operation in order to foster
A special
public
operation?
opinion. Yes, you never heard of them? Have you never heard of special operations?
No.
Well, for example, in Maidan, 2014, right, we know that people were shot not by.
How do you know that?
Because there have been detailed studies about this. This is many years on. It's 8 years on.
Which studies?
There have been detailed studies. Well, studies I've seen that
Which
show.
ones?
I mean, okay.
I don't know if this looks good.
Victoria Nuland,
Who?
at that time, I think Under Secretary for State at the moment, Victoria Nuland, right? The Under Secretary for State in the United States of America. At the time, she was involved in plotting a coup d'etat in Ukraine, right? You may support or not support that, but she was involved, and it was quite clear from the audio recordings that were released that she was involved in that. So I don't see why, and from what I understand, again, I'm not going to say I know all the truth, but what I understand, there were people shooting at the protesters and against the authorities, if you like, to escalate the crisis. And it's not weapons of mass destruction. There were many stories about that. Before the Iraq War, it turned out there were no weapons of mass destruction, right?
That's true.
So it was a deception.
That's true.
So there are deceptions, that's what I mean. And these deceptions can be used to bolster one position or another, particularly in a hot situation like now. I mean, I used to live in East Germany, before the Berlin Wall came down, people will engage in all sorts of deceptions.
Okay. So what's your point?
My point is that the presentation of the argument that you're making,
I'm not making an argument.
well, you were, because you were basically implying that there's no discussion to be had about climate change,
Okay.
and therefore that the BBC would never broadcast such a thing.
There isn't an argument about climate change.
Well, there is.
Who with?
Well, lots of people. I mean, from protesters who you could draw a parallel with these Gilets jaunes in France, who basically said you need to have fossil fuels. There are protests all around the world at the moment about gas prices and oil prices. Some people are very happy about there not being any gas coming from Russia. Other people think there should be gas coming from Russia, and that should be segregated out from the issue of the war in Ukraine.
Who thinks there should be gas coming from Russia?
Lots of people think there should be gas coming from Russia. I mean, you take in Sri Lanka, for example, or in Peru, there's been an uprising the last few days because the conditions in which people are living have been driven to desperation because of the sanctions regimes.
But there is a problem with in Sri Lanka specifically because the Prime Minister is not very efficient and they've got a debt of 7 billion and they've only got 1 billion in reserves.
Right, but let's take another example. In the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, as you say, may or may not be efficient, but what he did do was he promoted the idea that the entire farming system in Sri Lanka should be based on organic farming, and that destroyed the crops. So isn't that a danger that if, for example, Britain adopted that type of policy, or other countries, that it might cause crop failures and starvation around the world?
No, I don't think we'd do that. We'd do that.
It might.
We wouldn't do such a bad thing. We're probably going to move towards more organic farming, but to the extent that we can still feed a nation, we wouldn't do a sweeping thing like that.
Well, what about, given the fact that Sri Lanka is already facing this problem, it's a genuine concern, isn't it? It would be a legitimate discussion to have how much organic farming is suitable, because it could, for example, cause starvation. Hunger, starvation. Well, it could, for example, it could cause starvation.
In Britain,
No, Sri Lankans, so human beings as well. I think they count as well, and so are Ecuadorians, and so are Malaysians, Egyptians, and other people who are now facing real danger of hunger as a consequence of the green policies being promoted in some parts of the world, and as a consequence of the boycott on Russian oil and gas and so on.
who's over there?
Sorry?
Who are you pointing at?
No, I was just using expression, gesticulation, that's all. So what type of program you work on? News, is it?
Yeah, it's news. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're meeting our cameraman soon. But nice to meet you.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Want to give me your name?
No.
Okay, all right, thanks very much. So that's the BBC. What's your message today?
My message is that this government have absolutely not got it, despite pretending to lead at COP26. In the week that the IPCC
Do you believe in the government? I mean,
No, I
you're
don't
basically
believe
saying
in
you
the
don't believe in them. You don't believe in the
No,
government.
I don't believe in government, full stop. I don't think the government form of government that we have at the moment is in any way structurally or of its mindset up to solving the problem. I think that humans, and we have to lead by inventing the new paradigm ourselves locally, and then with any luck the government will follow and facilitate.
Okay. How do you feel about, or I'll ask you this another way. What is your definition? Like, is it just a moral thing for you that you think something's wrong and something must be done about it? Or are you saying, I'm like the Boris Johnson in the last couple of years, unfortunate phrase, I'm following the science? Is for you this a scientific question or a moral question? Or are the two synonymous?
What a brilliant question. I think the science informs a moral position that you have to take. If it weren't for carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, I'd still be a jobbing actor and director. But I can't, knowing what I know about the effect that humans are having on the planet and our possible future of complex life on it,
Okay, but
I can't
when you
not take action.
sorry, when you're dealing with that question in your mind,
Yeah.
is it that you see things around you that make you disgusted about the way the planet is polluted, or is it that you, in other words, direct experience, or is it information passed to you by, I don't know, a lobby or interest group or a scientific centre, or is it the science that drives you, or is it, again, this question about what's the motive? Is it because you feel disgusted about pollution and the way the world is run, or is it because you know for a fact that this particular problem, CO2, is causing X, Y, and Z?
I think it starts with disgust at the way the planet is organised and
Okay.
the injustice. I think I started with understanding how fucked up and unjust the planet was
Okay.
before I realised that it was being fucked over environmentally. This was way back in the 70s. And I felt that we needed to reorganise because the capitalist system is leading us completely in the wrong direction.
Okay, but there are many people within the capitalist system who have adopted the language of green, you might call them green washers, you might call them genuine people who believe the same arguments as you do, or people who are following the science. But if you're saying capitalism is responsible, then the focus perhaps returns again to socio-economic structure rather than asking them to do something. Like IPCC is a global intergovernmental institution.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, the WHO is a global institution which has pushed a particular pandemic agenda. So perhaps the IPCC is pushing a particular climate agenda that might suit some of the big capitalists, for example.
I don't think the IPCC is an organisation that's pushing anything. It's an organisation that is gathering the science together and evaluating it. I've been reading the science for the last 25 years.
Okay.
You know, I'm unfortunate in a way that I can kind of read some science and then draw some curves, and it always appalls and boggles my mind that the people who, including some of the scientists who should be able to do that, can't. And that the government is surprised that we are in a now or never situation. You know,
How do you know we're in a now or never?
from reading the science.
What part of that? I mean, what specific? Because for me, one of the things that has disturbed me in the last couple of years is the misuse of the language. Follow the science.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Yeah, I agree with you on that.
But
But that's
does
not to
that
say that the science is intrinsically bad, or.
it doesn't mean science is intrinsically bad, but it might mean that there are lobbies pushing certain agendas.
But there hasn't been a global pandemic organisation pulling together and evaluating all the science.
Right.
And there has been for climate since 1992, I think.
True. But there have been there are pandemic lobbies around the WHO that push for specific interests.
Yes, let's not get into the pandemic because.
But I don't want to dwell on that. But I'm just trying to draw a parallel.
Yes.
So that why, as I say, for me, the term "follow the science" now it sort of repels me to hear the words.
Well, I don't think it should. I think it should. It should.
I'm not anti-science, by the way.
No. I think you're quite right that it should. It should demand skepticism, but then all science should demand skepticism. And
I mean, doesn't it? Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but doesn't it then come back to that same issue about identifying science versus your moral concern about X, Y, and Z?
I think the two are umbilically linked. I think
Okay.
they feed each other. The more information you get about something, the more that informs what you think must be the direction of travel, the right thing to do. And, I'm asking myself whether you are sceptical about the climate science.
I am, yeah.
In what degree? You think it's not as urgent? You think it's not human? You think it's not now or never?
Yeah, I don't think it's now or never. I mean, one of the reasons
reread the science, mate.
Well, one of the reasons I say that is because I spent my adult life campaigning for socialism against capitalism, that sort of thing. And I remember being in various groups, and we were always told by the leadership of those groups that the world is on the edge of catastrophe, either victory of change or catastrophic defeat and barbarism, like Rosa Luxemburg, socialism or barbarism, So I grew up on that. That was my fodder. So after 40 years of this, I'm extremely sceptical of that type of thing. We are now at the moment of desperate change. I just think, it's a good motivating force, but I don't think it's a scientific argument.
Well, there are things that are not front and centre of the scientific discussion, but were presented in a couple of phrases in Antonio Guterres' presentation of the latest report.
Is he someone we should listen to?
Yes.
Why?
Because he is well informed. He has over his tenure in presenting on climate change, he has been measured and honest about what the reports are saying.
Okay.
In a way that other people aren't, and in a way that a lot of the sort of functionaries who then, and even the sort of scientific representatives, their instinct is to present what they can be certain about. at a certain point you have to draw the curves out of that. And there are scientists who do that. And they're the ones who are saying, scientists, come on you fuckers, you've got to shout about this.
The term scientist, who is a scientist?
People who do the experimental work, who do the modelling.
I mean, again, I've got a problem with the modelling. I mean, I went to a meeting with Neil Ferguson. I challenged his modelling based on an analysis by Johnny Ioannidis, one of the leading epidemiologists in the world, who showed his modelling was completely wrong. And yet the world has suffered a lot from that.
Yeah.
So if the modelling is wrong here, perhaps the same problem might emerge.
But if I've got on my wall a cartoon from about 20 years ago, sadly, and it's Climate Summit, and one person turns to the other and says, "What if it's all a hoax? What if we create a better world for nothing?" You know.
I think that's.
It isn't a hoax.
I think that's a fair point. I mean, that's less about the hoax. That's more about the morality again, though, isn't it? That's about coming back to the question: what is my motive for protesting to bring about change, to improve the world, right? But if improving the world, if in the motive to improve the world, you're relying upon one type of argument, supposedly from science, that then you're extrapolating to all scientists. And I often when I hear these people, they say, listen to the science, someone would turn around to, like someone earlier on turned around to me and said, what's your qualification? And then he said he's got a BA in this and BA in that. I said I got a PhD, but I don't think because of that I know what should be done, and I don't think that someone who doesn't have a qualification should not be able to challenge those who do.
No, I mean I have a BA in comparative English and comparative literature, and I was an actor for 25 years.
Right.
In terms of climate,
who would you say is the most important climate scientist in the world?
now, I think historically Jim Hansen.
Okay.
He did an awful lot of the warming. He was the organisation 350 was named after the report he did, where he said we might just be able to stabilise the climate at 350 parts per million, but it's more likely to be 300, and that's only 30 parts per million, less than 30 parts per million above the pre-industrial level, above where the climate was stable for.
If you had the
years.
chance,
Yep.
okay, so if you had the chance, if the technologies were there to basically control the temperature like a knob on a monthly basis, what should be the temperature?
The temperature should be the temperature to which complex life on this planet is adapted, and which complex life
Isn't that an extremely difficult thing to work out?
No.
Because, for example,
not.
if the temperature...
Complex life has evolved over thousands of years. The temperature... Millions of years. The temperature over the evolution and the speeding up of the evolution of complex life over the last few million years is something we can predict. It's something we can more or less assess. If we know we're moving out of the bounds of that, and we are moving out of the bounds of that faster than temperature has ever moved on the planet, then we know we're moving into extreme danger zones. If we're looking at the sixth extinction, which we are, we should be able to tell that what is happening now is catastrophic for complex life on the planet. It's not obviously just the temperature.
My question is this:
the temperature is the fundamental.
Let's say the temperature is rising exponentially, like from 1, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, whatever.
But the moment it gets beyond about 1.5 degrees, it goes to 14, 15.
Well, it doesn't automatically. This is an argument being made by those people who assume that the increase in CO2 produced by human economy, let's put it that way, not by man, it's the economy governing society. So in other words, by capitalism and the regime in China and so on. So that those things are shaping the direction in which the temperature moves. But if you had control over the temperature, in other words, there are people who argue for this. That's why I'm a little bit scared when I start hearing these things, carbon capture and things like that, and geoengineering.
It's a complete illusion, and it's extremely, extremely dangerous.
Right, but this is a huge section, another word, is a very important section of the climate influencers, if you like, who are promoting geoengineering,
Yes,
who are
if you listen
promoting.
to the science more and more, the scientists are saying, I mean, the modelling on the IPCC report that did the pathways to 1.5 and to 2 degrees,
Right.
all of them bar one contained the absolute necessity of negative emissions, carbon capture or geoengineering,
Right.
or bioenergy carbon capture and
Right,
storage, and
right.
catastrophe. The problem is they were more or less written by engineers who were going, X amount of carbon in the atmosphere, Y amount can
Exactly.
be taken out by trees.
Exactly.
Okay, there's an emissions gap. What can we do with that? Well, we need this technology. This technology will develop.
Exactly.
Right. So we build a pathway around this technology.
Right.
The policy makers in the previous report didn't really critique that. They didn't go, okay, well, where is carbon capture and storage? Where's it been for the last 30 years? How many billions have been invested in it? What is the curve we can draw for it?
So should, given the fact that that's a significant economic interest, like Bill Gates and others are making carbon capture devices,
Yeah.
and are arguing that this is the way to capture from the atmosphere and stop the problem,
Yeah. But they're interested-
shouldn't the protest be against them doing that type of thing, misleading people?
Well, it is partly. Not enough, but it is partly.
I mean, this guy Paul Polman, for example, he's a big supporter of Polman. He's a big supporter of XR, and Mark Carney. Mark Carney is former governor of the Bank of England.
Yeah.
Paul Polman, former CEO at Unilever, probably the largest producer of
Yeah.
consumer foods and so on.
I don't trust them. Partly because they have so much invested in the status quo that what they're trying to do is to decarbonise the status quo. And that is not a solution. That will never get us to where we need to be.
But isn't there then the question about how you differentiate between those people who are genuinely seeking to morally protect the environmental world that you live in,
Yeah.
and those people pushing a specific agenda about climatic change?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. But that's not to say that we shouldn't talk or include Mark Carney. You don't include Mark Carney, you can't have a conversation with Mark
Sure, but
Carney.
these are big players with their own agenda
I
behind
know.
them.
Oh yeah, but you know, there are also. I mean, you look at a lot of the advisors to XR. They're ex-chief inspectors of police. They're ex-petrochemical scientists. They're people who've done their stint. At a certain point, they've gone, oh fuck, I've only got 3 more years. Okay, 3 more years. Right, I've retired. Now I'm fucking joining XR.
Is that a good sign though, or is that possibly a bad sign? Does that not mean that you might be captured, as you say,
But I think
by
a lot of those
interest
people-
groups?
A lot of those people are very radical, and they deeply understand how the system that they've been part of all this time is antithetical to survival. And they bring useful understandings of the system.
But they also bring a weighted interest.
Well, in some cases they may, but you know, every single person here has a different interest sphere. Now, if I sat down and said, before I talk to anybody, I've got to work out exactly what their interests are, I'm never going to get any fucking.
Yeah, that's a little bit over the top. I mean, it's a reasonable argument. It's a little bit bending the stick.
Yeah, but what I'm well, I mean, I think the moral and the scientific is I feel you're trying to engineer me into.
I'm not trying to engineer anything. No.
I think we need transformation. I think we need to rethink the way we do everything. I don't think the government is up for leading us on this path. I don't think business is up for that, because it's, you know, the corporation is a psychopathic institution. It's like asking a corporation to commit suicide or to become something that it isn't. It's not really physically within the bounds of its possibility. Now, I don't have an answer to where change must come from other than from the bottom up, other than from people and communities and self-organisation and good process and imagination and local projects and bringing benefit in terms of carbon and ameliorating society and increasing justice, that at a certain point the government will go, fuck me, these people have got the answer, like they did over COVID.
You think so?
Yeah.
You think they did the right? You think they did right by that?
No, I don't. No, what I'm talking about is local food distribution. The really successful local food distribution was done by local people. And
Okay,
at a certain point,
that's-
the government said, "Oh fuck, we've got to get out of the way. We've got to facilitate."
Well, they said they wanted volunteers, but I don't know how many of the volunteers they used. They get anyway.
No,
That's a separate issue.
Forget the government organising volunteers. In Lambeth, we've been talking to
food supply and all
we've
that,
been
yeah.
talking to Lambeth about the potential food catastrophe of a hard Brexit. Okay,
Right.
we'd asked them to put in place vans and cold storage and kitchens and dedicate resources to drive, collect food waste, distribute it. They kind of said, "Oh, it's all very interesting, yes, but we're not going to put any money into it." 6 months later, a few months later, along comes COVID, and they've got this catastrophe. People need feeding.
Right.
They came back to us and they said, "We need to feed people.
Right.
Can you organise it for us?"
I just had two final questions.
And they said, and the community organised Lambeth's food distribution system.
Right. Two final questions. One, what's your name for the viewers, if you want? Give a false name if you want. And two, do you plan on getting arrested today?
Duncan Law from Brixton, and I don't plan on getting arrested today because
Okay.
I have to go and do family shit later on.
Okay. All right. Thanks ever so much.
Thanks
It's been a
very much.
pleasure.
See you.
Subject Access, the channel, yeah.
Say again?
Subject Access on YouTube. Subject Access.
Subject access.
Subject Access. That's the YouTube channel, yeah.
So Piers is not taking his, so I'm carrying these around like, oh sorry. Just take sugar. So, very good, it's healthier. Catch you later.
Yeah. How are you expecting it to go today then?
Very well, I hope.
Yeah. There are quite a lot of people planning to get arrested. What do you think will
Well,
happen?
I hope not.
Okay, this theory that Roger Hallam's got, that he put forward in his PhD, that if you've got 3% of the population behind you, you can change the balance of power. And to do that, you need to have people who are prepared to get arrested and fill up police stations. What do you think about that?
I couldn't tell you, to be honest. I haven't heard it. I haven't read it.
If all these people, well, let's say 2,000 of these people today choose to get arrested, how do you consider that? What's your approach to it?
I just hope people don't want to get arrested. They want to do it peacefully.
Well, they might do it peacefully, but they want to get arrested. That's part of their peaceful protest, isn't it? To get arrested, fill up the police stations. Keep you busy. Keep the busy boys busy.
Keep us busy, don't worry
Keep the
about
busy boys busy. All right, see you later. Yeah. Great glasses, mate.
Mic check! Mic check! Mic check!
I just wander around, trying to get the audience, get the whole crowd. occupational therapist?
Yes.
In NHS or?
In the NHS.
So what have you made of the last couple of years? How does it connect to this?
The pandemic?
Yeah.
Well, absolutely. The climate crisis is a health crisis. It's the way that we live within our environment, the way we destroy the natural environment. We're going to see more pandemics as things get worse. So I think if you care about your own health, then you absolutely should be joining this protest.
Okay. A little while ago there were attempts to impose vaccine mandates in Britain. Do you agree with that type of idea, or did you, whether you've been vaccinated or not, I'm not bothered, but do you agree with that ability of the state to impose such a thing on NHS staff, for example?
I think that's really difficult. I think it's really tricky, isn't it? I absolutely agree with people having their own freedom of choice, and I think if people choose, if they don't want to get vaccinated, it's because the public health message hasn't been effective enough to help them to understand why it's important to get vaccinated.
Yeah, for example, I saw in China over 40% of over 80-year-olds are refusing vaccination, arguing that they don't need it, you know, and they're prepared to take Chinese medicine instead. You know, isn't there a tradition which is sort of connected in with this type of movement that is sort of hippy dippy? No, I'm saying about public health. All right. How you doing, all right? Ah, the man with the van. How you doing, alright?
How are you getting on?
Not bad.
Always supporting Louis.
Sorry?
I'm here with Louis actually.
Yeah, I saw Louis, you're on,
I heard you speaking earlier as well. How do you find this kind of crowd?
It's quite a middle-class movement, which is almost like festival types. A little bit older festival types. But someone was talking about an actor earlier on I interviewed, and he was saying, well, you're doing very well, and then you're doing fine, and then you decide to quit everything and you go and do something dramatic like Extinction Rebellion. So you don't get arrested, that type of thing. You know what I mean?
Big social event.
I mean, like, you know, there's plenty of boys and girls there, although it's a bit of an older group today, but they're certainly in the past. But that's interesting that the age has increased a lot, because last time they were out in the Irish club, when they started, the big ones here, a lot of young people. Now there's only a few young people here.
It's the only people who get up early in the morning these days, I think. But the other thing is that you sort of wonder how much knowledge, how much research is.
I did ask a couple of people. It's, you know, I mean, generally I think most of them will have a degree, and I think people who've got a degree tend to have an affinity with the idea that they're following the science. Whether their degree is relevant to that or not, I don't know.
Well, Piers would probably say the same.
Challenge that, yeah. I'll have a little wander here. See you later, yeah? You've got a pan out there. Quite a few of them. 3,000 maybe, 2,000. But the most notable thing definitely is the age composition is a lot older than it used to be. I think what I'll do now actually, because nothing has been said on here that is within the realms of the forbidden from the point of view of YouTube, and that might change in the next period. So what I think I'll do is, because we've got 15 minutes recorded here, I'll chop off for now and then restart again, because this one I don't see any reason why it should be taken down from YouTube. But as I said, that might change if the discussions change or get heated or something like that. So signing off for now and coming back on in about 10 minutes or so. And I think that's probably 1 hour segments is probably fine, because I can just follow and check that they don't breach the rules. So I hope that was interesting or entertaining, and we'll be back in a little while.